forward to a fun chat tonight. This right here is a very interesting deck. I just decided to show for a couple reasons. Let me pull out the other one here so we have a frame of reference. There's a deck that I began using a while back called the Oracle of the Radiant Sun. I'm kind of a tarot snob with respect to certain criteria. I've been reading a very long time, and I have a very personal vocabulary, as all readers do, that's developed over years, and that is difficult to break with respect to habits, right? Because we think in language. We perceive reality as language, and so it's hard to break that habit. And with respect to oracles, I always kind of pictured them as a beginner tool that is really sort of a parlor version of the tarot, right? You have the tarot, which is based on this insanely complex and complete magical system, compared to, say, like, very beautifully and well done and well thought out and intuitively designed, but photographs with keyword type of, And so anytime I heard the word oracle, that wasn't in respect to Delphi, I didn't really give it any credence, right? And then I came across this thing here, and that totally changed my opinion of that, okay? Because not all oracle decks are the same, and what we're seeing here is the beautiful recognition of the DNA of tarot and its connection with astrology. So what this really is sort of it's a cartomancy, right? It's a divinatory tool that's in card form, but the direction they took is a planet and sign combination. Let me zoom in on that. This is a planet and sign combination, okay? And that is a very interesting take, because if you're familiar with astrology, which much more people are than tarot, even a water cooler horoscope type person would have some understanding of the signs and kind of what they mean, and the planets and kind of what they mean, and could put those together and maybe form an idea. And that's what these have done, right? And that said, anyone who's familiar with my live streams or any of my videos will know that I use this very frequently for love readings, connection type readings, like deeper kind of karmic stuff that we're trying to dive into, and so on. And it's very effective as well, as in addition to your tarot reading. So you use the tarot for its normal use, whether you have a specific spread or you're a freestyle, whatever you do. If there's something where you just need to get a quick connection on a couple cards, or get a more 60,000 foot view of a series of quartz and small cards, this is a great way to do that. And it's a very good addition to a tarot reading, to just kind of do your thing, grab a card, and use this in respect to the difference between two cards, or what's in between it, or similar to also if you're familiar with the Celtic cross, there's that card in the middle there, the 2, that this is the card that crosses you, and it kind of defines, is there something here that's sort of assisting the situation or hindering it? This can be that as well in a lot of readings, this deck. Now, I was so impressed with it, and the way it was put together, the obvious operative nature of the person that put it together. This is not an artist. This is a practitioner of astrology. It's obvious. Or they were directly informed by one, but no, the artwork is too right. It's they know things. So then, this here is a deck that was put out by the same group. Let me get my... Well, it looks like my puppy wants to come up and say hi. Come here, Arlo. While the dogs are out and about, you might hear them barking or playing with each other. And it's almost a goddess type of deck, obviously, since the moon, the lunar energy, is definitively feminine. So the way this works, it's just really very, and again, so well put together, and is a very powerful tool if you allow yourself to fully immerse in the language of astrology. So what we have here is three different types of card. Okay. And let me just separate these while I try to appease the puppy. Let's see what she wants. Hey Melody, what's going on back there? What you doing, honey? You wanna come say hi? She's spunky. She's a long-haired dachshund, and they are spunky. They are willful and strong-willed, and yeah. Okay. So let's separate the next batch here. The second batch of type of card is the moon cards. Coming up, baby? Come on up. Come say hello. Come on, Mama. Come say hi. Alrighty. This is Melanie. She's new to the house. And she pops in every once in a while. It turns out everything you've ever heard about dachshunds being crazy barkers is true. Don't ignore that, it's true. So what we have are the astrological signs. All right, and each sign, the way it was developed here, each sign is a correspondent goddess. Okay, so Scorpio, Lilith, Pisces, Ishtar, Freya. And so, this is a very interesting take on that. But also, obviously each data element can be taken on its own. So you can strictly look at this as the sign. You can strictly look at it as the goddess. And depending upon your knowledge of the individual goddesses or the mythology behind it, it gives you access to additional symbolism, right? And then there's some other information here related to the elements and so forth. And that ties into here, which we'll get to, right? These tie into here. So that said, the second type of cards that you see here is the moon cards themselves. Okay. And what these are referencing is the phases and the transitions between the phases and how that affects the energy is looked at through the elemental, the keyword, and then the particular phase, right? And so in this case, this card is the full moon, and the full moon card is right here in this in between the waxing and waning. And now here we have a similar circumstance, but it's the new moon or the black moon, right? Flower, dormant, recognition, revision, right? And we're going to talk about that later. One's a 4, one's an 8, one's fire, one's air, and so on. And then the third section here we have is the basically the transitions between the wheel, right? So if we look at the wheel and we draw a circle around the sky as it rotates, as the stars rotate throughout the year, you'll see these dates in the middle white section there with the astrological signs, right? Like Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, so forth. The ring right inner from that are the dates. These are 10-degree periods of time, known as the decans. Decan due to the fact, deca meaning 10, decanate, decan, comes from that word. And so if we consider what we're looking at here, it's basically the wheel of time throughout a calendar year, right? So this said, what these cards represent are the transitional periods of those throughout the wheel. Okay, and now how this works is you'll see 2 planets, and then you'll see 2 periods of time here, okay, that have signs next to them. So what this is saying is you have Mercury. Swati, hello. You have Mercury moving through from the 25th or 25 degrees Capricorn to 8 degrees Aquarius. Okay, and the idea of this period of time is associated with the mask. Okay, and the mask being the idea of sort of changing the personality when necessary in order that you are able to communicate effectively enough that you get your point across, that your will be done. That certainly is the goal, I suppose, with any communication, is either to learn or to interrogate the universe, right? So that said, sure, yeah, absolutely. Anybody who participates in my live stream is entitled to a free personal message. Okay, and the way that I accomplish that is we find your birth card. Okay, and if you're not familiar with your birth card, then I can locate it very quickly. I just need the month and day of your birth, not the year. That's not necessary in this circumstance, but just the month and day, and then that will allow me to locate your birth card, and then I'll be able to apply that to the current period of time that we're in, which is the 8 of Pentacles, ruled by the Hermit. And so that essentially applying your birth card with these two gives you a snapshot of the next sort of like 10-day period of time. So it's like a mini horoscope, okay? And that's provided free to anybody who participates in my live stream. So what we do is we take the wheel here and we find July 15th. And July 15th can be located simply by looking at that inside white inner wheel and following it until you find the date. Now, in this particular circumstance, you're falling under Gemini, right? Or rather Cancer. And you are falling under the moon as the ruling planet of the period of time, but you're also falling under the moon as the individual planet of that time, of the deacon. And so essentially this would be read astrologically as the moon in Cancer. Okay. And secondly, your card is the Four of Cups. So your particular birth card in the tarot would be the Four of Cups. Okay. And so let's just do that. Give me a moment here to set this up for you, and I'll get that ready for you. Okay. Okay, so your birth card is the Four of Cups. Okay, and what we do here is we're going to apply that to these cards here. And what these cards represent are actually quite significant. These cards represent astrologically the current period of time that we're in. And very significantly, your birth card does not change throughout your life. So it's not derived, as you just saw, by a divinatory process of shuffling cards or of some synchronistic ritual process. Rather, it stays with you your whole life, kind of like your birth sign, right? So what we have in the Four of Cup is the idea of a few things. First, the cup is the element of water, which also represents the idea of the heart as opposed to the mind or the body or the spirit, which are the other elements, right? And so this represents the heart. And so anytime you see this in a basic karmic circumstance, what the cup represents is that you are driven by your heart. You're able to process things emotionally easier than you're able to process intellectually or physically. Also, and this is the specific lesson of the Four, is that you have this person that appears to be in a meditative state, leaning up against a tree, or at least they're in a contemplative state. They're thoughtful, but remember, we're talking about cups, and so it's why. Why are they sitting there looking at these three cups? And what they're doing is it's kind of a proud moment. They're like, oh, look at these cups that I have, and what they mean, and all the things inside of them that give me this power and this individuality and my identity. Hello, Splash Autumn. Thanks for popping in. And absolutely. And then we have the cup coming from the cloud. Now, if you'll notice, the individual is busy staring at the three cups, and so they miss the one coming from divinity. And the point here is, and the lesson of the Four of Cup is, don't miss the forest for the trees. Don't stare at all your wants, desires, your failures, your pain. Don't spend too much time staring at that, enough that you miss the true statements of the heart from yourself that's in the form of the cloud there, right? And now the Hermit means that this process occurs alone, and that truth is only visible in darkness, and it uses a special kind of light. This light is so special that it can only shine on the truth, but it's drowned out in the sunlight. You can't see it. So only in darkness is this possible. And the Hermit is going through this process of, and all of us are going through this process right now, of doing the work of going into the darkness and confronting the truth alone. Now, the result of that is enlightenment, is knowledge of the self, is therefore the ability to use that. It becomes a tool for you. It becomes I don't even know if that's accurate. It's more that you're swimming with the current of the universe as opposed to against it. And consider, when you're swimming with the current of the universe, you have the universe behind you, right? Like, that's not a bad place to be. And the opposite is also true. If you're swimming against it, you have the universe working against you. And to whatever degree that is, within your closeness to truth or your closeness to the lie, determines how bad or how good it is, right? So, As far as the 7, or the 8 rather, of Pentacle, the 8 of Pentacle is a position where you, your work is recognized and you've gotten busy. The work is good and people want it. And this puts you in a position of allowing for growth to occur, but it's also a warning that because of this new busyness, there's a possibility that the work suffers and you don't grow anymore, and you in fact can reduce. And so the lesson here is don't let the work suffer. Take the steps that allow you to grow smoother while the work doesn't suffer, whether that be automating or increasing productivity or your process, the way, whether it's artistic or otherwise creative, bringing in partners. There's lots of ways to go about that, right? And so that's the ultimate lesson here, Swati, okay? And this is your process over the next, say, 10-day period, a little less at this point, about a week. And so the energy is positive for you right now to go through this process and do this work. And the result will be good if you do it properly. If you do it truthfully with your heart, and your goal is to actually learn who you are and take on this role of the hermit. If you do it for real, you can have the result of that, which is positive, okay? And so that's your message for the next week or so. So Splash, hello. Splash, hello. Okay, well, you know what? Why don't we do... well, first of all, ask me, let's look at the question that you're looking at. And I would be happy to do a $10 reading for $5. I'm happy to do that. And so, if you want to look at... let's look at the type of question that you're looking at, and then we'll decide what reading is appropriate, okay? And we'll do it for $5, no problem. You're quite welcome, Swati. I hope that was insightful. And all I ask, if you find any value in what I'm doing with your personal message, they are free. And so all I ask is that you like the video and you consider a comment. It does mean a lot. The reason you're looking at me right now is because the robot showed my face to you on the computer. And robots read the comments, right? So I would always appreciate a comment. Okay, let's see. No, I'll go ahead and give you a full reading for the $5. It's not a problem. It's my channel. I reserve the right to do that. So we can do a Celtic cross or an astrology house or a what if. We'll do a full spread. My question is which reading to do, and that'll be determined by what your question is. So no problem, Splash. We'll just we'll do it for $5 no matter what. Don't worry. It'll also help me to determine what wanting to look at. We may go for Tarot of the Holy Light, which I've been using a lot of lately, or maybe the Lon Milo Duquette, which is one of my favorite decks ever. If I had to take one deck with me on a desert island, that'd be the one I took. So you tell me, Splash, what is it you'd like to look into, and we'll figure it out. In the meantime, I'm going to shuffle this. I'm not reading with it tonight. I have never done a reading with this deck yet, and I'm not going to read with it tonight. But I'm just going to kind of feel its energy and sort of shuffle, and might pull a card here and there, whatever. But it is a deck that I'm going to talk about and highlight in a future video. Okay. What should I do? Path. Okay. That's a great question. You know, it's interesting. People often ask what will happen. Very rarely do people ask what can I do so that what I want to happen happens. All right. Sure. No problem. Actually, I was going to say I need about 5 minutes anyway. And so you do that, and I'll be back in about 5 minutes, okay? No problem. We'll do that. Oh, that's my puppy, by the way, so I apologize for the barking, guys. But she's going to chime in a couple of times during the readings tonight, and that's because she wants to be heard. Yes, you do. You want to be heard. Come here, honey. She's a long-haired dachshund little girl. Come here. She's only 6 months old. No? Yes. Come here, baby. Come say hi. Oh, there she is. This is my Melanie. That's right. Say hello to everybody. You want to say hi? So you might be hearing her bark tonight. Okay, guys. So I'll be back in about 5 minutes, okay? And we'll go from there. Alrighty. There's a couple of ideas I have with respect to spreads, okay? The Celtic cross obviously is the old standard, right? This is the one that we go to when we don't know what to ask. I hate to say that, but I've been reading tarot for close to 40 years. And I've been doing readings for people in earnest, like actually, studying and sort of taking it seriously for people for 35 years. And in that time, you hear a lot of questions. You do a ton of readings, thousands and thousands. I mean, I can't even begin to think about what the number is. The Celtic cross is very effective. It does get to the heart of things, and it does uncover things. But I will say that it's very general, and so it's really effective when you don't have a question. If you do have a question, it can be utilized for that, because you can apply situational, positional context, which is really the definition of a spread to begin with. But it's I find when I use it for that, great, no problem. I find when I use Celtic Cross for specific questions rather than general readings, that I'm stretching, I'm trying, and that is really, really dangerous with tarot. And I usually abandon readings if I have the sensation that I'm trying, because that's not what I'm here to do. So that said, I don't think Celtic Cross is the right reading. I think that the Astro House is more appropriate. The way that I draw the connections after the fact, that's a really good reading. And another good reading, if you have a very specific question, would be the what if. So what we do with the what if is we determine what is the situation that we're referring to as it stands right now, like what's your feelings about it, what are your goals, and what is the current karmic trajectory, right? And then there's the what if. That is that here are two circumstances, typically 3 cards apiece. It goes up if it needs to. If I took one path or another, what do those look like, right? And then there's a third sort of perspective of what is the ideal path to take? Like, what's the suggested, from the respect of what your goal is, and ultimately from the respect of honoring the karmic balance, the idea that the universe will find balance. That's all it does. And sometimes that's cold, and sometimes that's easy, right? But what this is going to tell us is what is the correct path that your goal be met and things be in order. And then finally, there's a series that is, if I did nothing, what's going to happen? Like, if I just let things fall, where would that land, right? And so that's the what if reading. And so I'm kind of torn between astrology houses and what if. The astrology houses, essentially, if you've ever seen the wheel of the year, like a natal chart, essentially the natal chart is, well, here's something that looks similar to it. And I use this wheel to do a lot of readings, and I'm going to talk about this tonight. This is a very effective learning tool, right? And so we're gonna look at that. But basically, the astrology houses, what this does is if you separate the wheel into 12 sections, those are called the houses, and each one represents a different snapshot. Now, this is different than the Celtic Cross, although it seems similar. It's not. This is different from the Celtic Cross in that this is a snapshot of the moment you were born. This is, whereas the Celtic Cross is more situational at the moment. So now what this allows us to do is to get the snapshot of where you're coming from. It's kind of like the idea of, let's say anyone who understands music will get the reference. Once I know the root note, I now know what notes to hit to get a pretty chord. If I don't know what the root note is and I just hit 2 other notes randomly, not knowing, it might turn out ugly, right? So what we're trying to do with the houses spread is, what is the snapshot of where you were born, so we have your root note, right? Now we can build the chord and make it pretty. And the way we do that is that we use other connections in this process to say, okay, now that we know where we came from and we know where we want to go, what can we do to help that? And so that's that's the reading that we're gonna do, okay? Mahashwali, hello. Good to see you. Thank you for participating in the chat. We're looking at a couple of things tonight, actually. First thing we're going to talk about is a few things. We're entering a new period of time, and it's actually tied to how to read specific dates. And so it's going to be sort of a lesson and a reading at the same time. And that reading is relevant to everybody. So it's good for anyone who wants to hear that message. We're entering a new period of time astrologically, and the implications of that, and how that relates to the tarot. Okay, then the daily message, the pet message, if it happens to be your birthday, which we'll let the stream fill up a little bit before we go there, and some other things. So, okay, let me take a look. Can this be a moment for me to check? Just a moment. There it goes. You know, streaming at the same time is a little bit of a hiccup sometimes. I have a pretty standard laptop. It's not too powerful, and so it's not always the fastest while streaming. And so you'll have to give me... there we go. Okay. Yep. It looks like everything went just fine. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Alrighty. So give me just a moment here. Okay, and anybody who's joining the stream, I am doing a reading for Angelica, and then we'll continue with the free list shortly after that. Okay, so we're looking at January 25th. So let's take a look at the wheel here, right? We find January 25th, which is going to be roughly in the, obviously Capricorn, but we're going to be looking at right there, top left in Aquarius. Planet is Venus. And essentially, from an astrological perspective, this would be Aquarius, or Venus in Aquarius, right? Now that's not your sun sign, or that's not how this works. This is the much older than like the Golden Dawn or even the Rosicrucians. This is a very ancient knowledge that was developed at the time of basically the ancients developed the system. And so this particular wheel is simply a diagram that's designed to easily reference this knowledge, right? And so at the end of the day, you have Aquarius in Venus. Your birth card in this particular circumstance is the Five of Swords. Just want to verify that. Scroll back here and look at the date. January 25th is the Five of Swords. Okay, so Five of Swords. Let's pop that out. Give me just a moment. There we go. Okay. Great. Okay. So, what we're going to be looking at is a spread that is designed around the houses of astrology. I'm going to be using 2 decks for this reading. The first deck I'm going to be using is Lon Milo Duquette's Tarot of Ceremonial Magic. It's quite a powerful tool for accessing truth. And the second deck I'm going to be using in conjunction with that is going to be the Oracle of the Radiant Sun. Okay. Now, interestingly, too, if you take your name, Splash Autumn, as a verb, and that's just actually a beautiful poetic image of splashing autumn around. Like, just imagine that. You know how, like, there's people who can, like, in the movies do, like, ice and fire and all, just, like, you splash autumn. Anyway, so, this first step is going to be going through the houses, and it's simply drawing 12 cards in this pattern and reading them accordingly. Okay, and that's the process that we're going to go through. And then once these are complete, we'll do the particular connections to determine the action that should be taken to achieve that particular goal, right? Like in this circumstance, it's probably going to have something related to the second position, as well as the 9th position and how those two connect. Your worldview and your philosophy on the world have a very, very big impact on your behavior, which affects the work that you do, the relationships that you have. It really affects a lot of your circumstances in your life. And there's some other things here that are going to uncover a lot of that. And so we'll look at each of those in turn, okay? And so let's go back to... Okay. And so we're also going to consider your birth card, 5 of Swords, which refers to the lesson that there's several different stages of, in this case, almost a manipulation. The person in the front manipulated those other two to do work while this person gets all the benefit. And so you're either the person getting all the benefit, you're the one in the middle that's determining that that's wrong and saying I'm done, and then the one in the back that's kind of like really just lost everything, right? And so those are 3 different perspectives of this idea of the exchange of give and take. Okay? Right, okay. And now the order that these get read is important. Let me just jump to the desk here. Okay. And so six. Okay, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. Okay. Now, you'll see here in the first position on the bottom left refers to the self and the identity. And what this refers to with respect karmically is the idea of at the moment that you, and this is important, the you that is eternal. It's like it's the you that is the infinite you that was before the body that you're occupying, and the one that will persist after this body is no longer. That idea, okay? That energy is what forms the identity. It's kind of like the basis for where that energy comes from, okay? And that's going to be this first card. There we go. Okay. There it is. And so the first card here is, let's get that in there, the Queen of Wands. Okay, the Queen of Wands represents the idea of fire, and now of the elements, there's multiple interpretations of the elements: fire, water, earth, and air. And if you consider, air is mind, earth is body, the cup is the heart, and fire would be spirit or soul. Right, the energy that drives you, and it's the life force. Okay, so your identity, use this as the foundation. Okay, and what that means is the idea that you are probably driven by a primal energy rather than a emotionally strictly or intellectually strictly. It's deeper than that. You're driven by it's a hunger, right? It's more than just, I find this interesting, or I have this skill and I feel like I can monetize it, or whatever the case may be. It's more than that. This is actually a very deep drive that has developed your identity, and what that identity is the idea of there being a support of other people. Like, you want them to be able to come to you because you provide them with either like an emotional support. That's half accurate. More importantly, like you help them build their identity. You help them develop their self. And they like that, and so people are attracted to that. Now, this also represents, and all of the queens do, they're not strictly the element of fire. They introduce another element as well. And in this particular circumstance, she introduces water. She's the watery part of fire. And so this is the emotional part of spirit. And so imagine the spiritual snapshot manifesting through the heart into the world, and not intellectually, not physically, but through emotion. That's what drives you. That's your identity, and that is how your identity is formed over time. And you'll see how this plays with these other cards as we go through this process, right? So the second card in this process talks about, and this is important because it's tied to your behavior. Money, work, possessions, like physical, the things we collect, and the things that we that are necessary for us to do that, right? So you have to work and earn in order to obtain possession. And possession is also a personal sensation, that I have ownership to this said thing. That's a personal thing. The card that we have here is the Star. And so this is a very good sign, actually, with respect to finance, and also specifically with respect to what you do in order to earn. The idea of the Star is the idea of, rather than reflecting the world, which is what most people do, oh, I want to do that, oh, they're doing that, so I'm going to do that. This is the opposite. This is radiating your own light, being seen, but only in truth, meaning that, like, you can't fake this. The moment you do, you stop shining and you start reflecting again, which is not the same as shining, right? And so what the lesson of the Star is that by shedding falsehood, i.e. the rest of the world, and identifying with that, you identify with self, and in doing so, automatically you radiate as opposed to reflect, and in doing so, you draw attention, right? So it's the idea of being seen through truthfulness, because the self is actually that powerful. If you are actually reflecting the true self, you become as bright as the sun. You become a star. So this is really good stuff, but it requires authenticity. It's not free. You have to be yourself, and the cost of not being yourself is painful. Zucano, good to see you. Thanks for popping in on the stream. I'm in the middle of a reading, but I'm going to get to the free list shortly. And Angelica, the connections of what to do in these circumstances will become clear here in a moment. Is that the puppy? I saw the puppy shaking the camera. And so, wow, hang on. Melanie, come here, baby. Where's that puppy? Kind of scary. Okay, so there she is. Hey, baby, come here. Let me jump to this third position, which is communication and language. Communication and language is quite an important subject because it's how we see the world, right? You know, we've all learned in school that the universe is made up of atoms, right? Well, it turns out that's not true. It turns out that the universe is made of language, because that's how we see it. Like, we don't see atoms. We can't see atoms. Whether or not that they're made up of atoms, which, again, we even have a limited understanding of that. It's not little billiard balls, floating around each other. It's not how it works. Regardless of what's really out there, we are not able to perceive it. We only perceive a small slice through the five senses, and then perceived, processed, and then told to us through symbols that we then interpret. So we have no idea what reality looks like. This idea here, okay, of the communication and language is relevant because this is how we interface with reality. And what our language system is determines how we see the world. And what your language system is peace, fairness, finding balance to the degree that everyone can benefit and it not be one-sided. And in doing so, you're able to bring people together, right? And that's really the goal. Same thing kind of with the star, and even with the Queen of Wands, there's this idea that you want to bring people together and you want people to see you as the person that's able to do that. There's value and to you if you're able to show people you can do that, and there's value to them when you accomplish it for them. And the idea of the Four of Swords is an intellectual exercise, right? Not only is it an intellectual exercise, it's this idea of the it's active. It's you're taking an action, and so it's not a passive thing that happens. It's something that you have to do. You're choosing that by everyone finding a middle. Motion happens, right? And that's a good thing. So there's an important part of this that what is the motivation behind the communication, right? I mean, obviously not every communication in your life is toward this goal. There are 100 reasons in a day that we will communicate for other reasons, whether it be selfish or otherwise. And so you have to ask what the motivation is behind that. And what that is going to be determined by this card, right? Because this is the direct result of that motivation. And so you can tell a lot about a person and yourself by looking at the things you want. And as you grow and change, the things you want change. But the point is that this idea of you bringing people together as a form of communication is also highly effective to you as achieving the goal of authenticity, allowing you to be seen for that, for finding that middle and allowing people to gather. This card, it's sort of an important one from the degree of where we came from, because it's the idea of sort of what surrounds us in our immediate environment. Like who is your family? What kind of home do you live in? It's the idea of the place that you are, and you know, we, as much as we don't want to admit this, there's a good portion of our behavior, our feelings, our thoughts, and a lot of these things that are very dependent upon our environment. Regardless of how much control we think we have over our feelings, our thoughts, or ourselves, we are very much at the mercy of our environment. Consider why scientists use colors in hospital rooms, in restaurants, to elicit certain emotions. We know that there's certain chords that can make people sad or happy, and rhythms and so on. Like, we're very susceptible to that, right? Our environment matters. Our family is very important because it's who we love and who we think love us. It's the motivation behind why we do the things we do, is so that we can move them and they can move us. What we have here is the Queen of Swords. The Queen of Swords is intellectual. It is the watery part of air. See here, this is the watery part of fire. This is the watery part of air. So it refers to the idea of the movement and the motion of the mind. And so what this means is that, like, brains are important in your family. There's a competition, and it's very cerebral. There's an idea here as well of there being a lot of woman energy. There's a lot of feminine energy, and what that refers to is receptivity. It refers to the idea of recognizing that if you want something to grow, it needs to be cultivated, not just wanted. You have to love it. You have to give it care. You have to nurture it, and the idea needs attention. In this case, that attention is active and is mentally based, not physically or emotionally. So it's a matter of planning. It's a matter of studying the right information. It's a matter of not taking things for granted, and doing the research, right, so that you know that you have good facts. Like, these types of these things matter to your environment. You know, fact-based kind of idea. Okay. And you know, the same thing with the home. There's a practicality to it. It is, from a design perspective, I could see you being very comfortable in a space that is minimalist without too much visual clutter. Like, art is nice as an example, or, you know, certain kinds of arrangements. But if it's too busy, I see that being almost like a detriment to the way that your mind flows. And also patterns, complex geometrical patterns, as opposed to more organic. I don't know. Oh, so this card represents what do you want? What do you seek? There's an important implication here. If you want it, it means you don't have it. Right? If you had it, you wouldn't want it. So the fact that it falls in this position means that you don't have it and you're seeking it. It could even be subconscious, but rarely. Very usually, this card is so intense of a want, you know it, right? And so what this is the Ace of Cups, and what this is referring to is love. What you want is to be loved. Now, that doesn't necessarily even mean individually, like a person, like a lover. This means that you want to be loved, and this is also there's a lot of being seen here, and if you consider that where this fell contextually, that makes a lot of sense, because it's even at the core. Remember, we're still in like the karmic sense here. Like, this is where you came from, and the trajectory. Like, what is the vector? from the moment of your birth. And that idea is that you have this desire to be seen, to be loved, not just seen, but that people like what they see and they want more of that, or this individual loves you and they want more of you. This is the spiritual part, essentially, of air, or water rather. And so it's the core of love. It's the core of the heart, of emotion. Could also very well manifest, and oftentimes does, unstable, intimidating. That's going to tie in a lot to a couple of things here, because this is kind of one of the roots of your question. What this refers to is, it's kind of like the idea of how did you manifest physically at the moment of your birth, because you are immortal. You are not a body. You don't get in a car and become a Ford. You don't get into this and become a human. You occupy a human. And what you were when you manifested through this tiny space and then back in this microcosm, macrocosm state and manifested physically, that imprint is like the crystal matrix that you grew from into what you are now, right? And so now, if you consider that, what this refers to is like the physical manifestation, how the health is the term that's used. But it's more importantly, it's the idea of what is the physical state that you will build on moving forward in your life. And what we have here is the Princess of Wands, right? The princess, for those that are not familiar with the Thoth system or the Golden Dawn, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Rosicrucian and so on, the builders of the Addendum, any of these, the idea of the princess is the page. It's the initial, but it also refers to, very powerfully, it refers to the physical manifestation of the root element. So it's not like the knight, the king, the queen. It's a little different. It's like the initial physical manifestation of this element. And in this case, that element being fire. Okay. Now, what does that mean to your health? Well, first of all, it means that there's a transience to it, meaning that it changes often. This is very indicative of a person that will work out and then stop, or go through phases where they change very frequently in their style or how they physically represent themselves to the world. Change in hair color, change in style frequently, clothing style, or and this is very common with me personally, like up and down in weight, very frequent. Frequent being every several years or whatever the case. And so, but the idea here is that there's a lot of motion going on with respect to your physical health. And another important dynamic here, this is the earth of fire. If you consider the way those two things come together, it's the idea of movement and motion, and of a great example visually would be lava. It's in a liquid state at first, but then it hardens, right? And if it were to melt, it could harden into a different shape. And it's this idea of change. So, there's a lot of movement and motion, and it's all passionate. It's not mental, it's not physical, it's not emotional, it's root chakra stuff, right? You're talking like base root chakra stuff. That would also mean that physically you would express yourself sexually in a healthy way. Not too many hang-ups. Once you're open to your authentic self, right? I mean, that's clearly not the case if you're still in the state of reflection as opposed to casting. So now, we move to the top row into the 7th position. And this refers to relationships. Love is the generic term, but what this does really refer to is how you build relationships. How do you develop connections with people, right? It's kind of everything, because our soul does not just wander the universe alone with no interaction. It interrogates as a way of being. And one of the ways that we do that is we interact with each other, and through those connections we're able to learn a lot about who we are. Don't forget, this is the universe looking at itself. When you meet eyes with another person, that's the universe looking at itself. And I can learn a lot about me by knowing about you. And we know that here. This knows that. This doesn't. This does, right? And so what we're going to talk about here is, how do you form those connections? Because how you form those connections is going to determine what you know about yourself, and what you know about yourself determines your behavior, which determines your life. Everything's connected. And it all comes down to, who are you? And are you being that, or are you being something else? And the more you're being, the more you have the momentum of the universe behind you. The less you are that, the more you have the momentum of the universe against you, right? So your form of communication is the fiery part of air. This refers to the Knight of Swords. Knights in this, I'm sorry to confuse people who are tarot practitioners if they're not familiar with the Thoth system. The Knight is the king. The Prince is the Knight. But I do understand it from the respect that very typically the Knight becomes the king through battle and victory, and the Prince is always in a state of waiting to be king. He's not the king, which is, makes a lot of sense. So, with respect to the idea of how do you connect with people, you connect with people very at their level. You are a very you're quick and sharp with respect to how you can sort of read a personality and know what they want and give it to them for the sake of having a smooth conversation and communication happening. And you're savvy at that. That has served you in your life. It doesn't hurt that you're pretty smart. And so when you put those two things together, it's like, easy for you to, even if you don't seem it, lead a conversation. If you're passionate about a subject, that goes away, and you can be a little heated, and so you got to be careful about those times where you're trying to get your point across and you get a little too preachy, or you get a little too heated where you lose the room, right? If you get emotional when people aren't expecting that, it puts them in a defensive position, and that is not a position of receptivity. It's kind of the opposite, right? So, right. So those moments are a warning to you, but you know what you're doing, and you're very fortunate because not everybody's born with that, and that may even have something to do with kind of where you are, and if you work on that one couple of things, that might even make some interactions easier in your life, even just like little ones at the store, at the gas station, when you're trying to make a turn and someone needs to let you in, and it's up to them if they let you in or not. Like, do you win that? Like, there's a lot of ways. We don't just communicate with words. We communicate with eye contact, with positions, with facial micro expressions, with pheromones that are subconscious, with all kinds of things. So how we communicate is important, and that's not a problem for you. On a lot of bases, you've kind of got that handled. And there's this idea of being brutally honest when you need to, and kind of lying when you need to, as a form of communication, right? And however you prefer honest, because it's easier, it's more practical, it's more like and why, if not necessary, embellish, right? Which I can agree with to a certain degree. Okay, let's look at this next position here. And what we're looking at in this case here is the how do you manifest, and it's very much like what we talked about a moment ago. In this card, what this is how do you express yourself physically, sexually, through your root chakra? So not just sexually, but what is the root of your desire? And how do you manifest that on a physical level? And there's a couple of different dynamics related to that. It's your power. And at the same time, it's also your desire. It's the source of your desire, right? And so what we're seeing here is the Five of Wands. You have some issues, whether it's that you are afraid, or there's some shame issues, or whatever it is. There's parts of you and parts of that part of you that you will not express. You're afraid to express, or you won't speak about, or you won't even explore with somebody that hopefully you'd be comfortable enough to do that with, in the form of a lover, or even a best friend that you can talk about things like this. It's intimate, it's personal, I get it, but you know, everybody needs somebody that they can open up to about that, and also, more importantly, that they can explore those things with directly, empirically, do these things. And if you're not, you kind of ask yourself, and this is important, like, why? Is it a fear? Is it an insecurity? Did something occur that was traumatic that affected that? You know, is there something going on otherwise that's affecting that? You can tell a lot about yourself by your appetites and how you satisfy them. You got to let go of that fear, but we'll talk about that because you're missing out. This position here talks about, and we're in the ninth position now, number 9, is your philosophy, your worldview. Now, what this refers to is, and it's very similar to the way you communicate, because we see and interface with the world through language. This is similar to that, and what is your worldview? How does the world communicate to you? What is the lie you're buying? What is the truth that you can see through those lies? That's your worldview. One example of a worldview, this is a good definition. I use this all the time with clients, and they immediately get it. When you're sitting in a chair and you stand up, okay? You put your foot on the ground and you stand up. Now, do you think to yourself, gee, I hope the floor is going to be there to meet my foot? No, right? You just assume that the floor is going to be there. In fact, you assume it so deeply it does not even enter your conscious thinking. You just know that the floor is going to be there, right? You just know it. That is your worldview. Your worldview is floors allow feet to not pass through them, right? Floors are useful for navigating using your feet. Like it's part of your worldview, right? You know, we have a worldview that 1 + 1 = 2, and so if I see one thing and I see another one thing and they look the same, I can say, oh, that's 2 things, right? It's that idea, and that's an assumption, and I don't have that thought every time I see 2 things. It just is an automatic, and that automatic thinking is your worldview. Your worldview is very beautiful, actually. Your worldview is the sun. And there's good and bad here, but the good is the sun is the ultimate giver of life, of light, of heat, of nourishment. It feeds the plants that feed us. It feeds the plants that feeds the animals that feed us. It feeds all life on Earth. Even the plants that live in the deepest depths of the ocean that don't get sunlight exist because of the sun. Because if it weren't for the sun, they wouldn't exist, because there would be plants that use the sun. Like it's It's because of everybody's connections that there's this cyclical nature. The sun is the ultimate creator of the physical, right? Like, what are you made of? Stardust. You came from the dust of the sun. That's where you came from. And your atoms came from the sun. At least the vehicle you drive was manufactured on the sun. Your soul came from a very different place. It came from nowhere. It has always been. But now, so that said, though, the idea of your worldview is that it's positive. It's perhaps, maybe even people would say, overly enthusiastic. You're a jovial person, and then you're a good person to be around, and you make people happy when you're in a good place. There's another lesson in the sun as well, that the sun is unreachable. Like, you can't. You can't reach it. You can, you could try, but. Hello, Srishti. Thanks for popping in on the stream. So the sun is unreachable. It's dangerous, in fact, if you get too close, right? It's, it's a... And the idea of the unreachableness is the lesson here. It's that there's a part of you that feels like that the world, the ideal, isn't possible, even though you still are enthusiastic. That's the sun. It hasn't gotten to you yet. The fact that you don't really believe that it's possible, there's a part of you that refuses to believe that and believes that, it is possible. And you're not going to make me sad when I'm happy, right? That's a great energy, and that's an attractive energy. That's why you're able to get groups of people, because they want that. They want to feel that same way, that, that positivity. That's not some kind of like just sort of like new agey sort of, think positive. It's more than that. It's the knowledge that the bestower can be cajoled, right? And so, yeah, the sun is not a bad energy to have as your worldview. Your worldview can change. It's difficult to do that without pretty heavy traumatic experience or a desire to do so. Otherwise, you sort of get stuck in a loop, or most people do. In the 10th position is the idea, and this ties into a lot of how you're going to manifest your question here, because it has to do with how you connect with the world, your social status, your how you're seen by as far as authority over others, groups, the part of you that you show, right? Like, if desire is what you don't have, this is sort of how you use and the result of how you use what you do have. It's the idea of within your local community, within your chosen field, how are you looked at? Do you have authority, or are you more toward the bottom? And what we see here is the Two of Swords. This is the idea of the airy part of Earth. This is the idea of intellectual stability. A person that appears very much to have their act together. Their outer self is refined, almost a sense of masterfulness, like a sense of masterful self-control, and something that can be trusted as an authority. In respect to the question of social status, here's the cool part. You are identifiable. Therefore, your social status is not superior. People don't look at you as greater than them, but they look at you as an equal, and therefore assign you higher status than others. So your status is not because you are bigger, badder, greater, faster, stronger, richer. It's because people believe you. You're attainable. You're approachable, and there's a realness to that is, it puts people on a comfortable plane because they feel like you're equals, and they assign you higher status because of that, right? So now, let's jump to number 11 here. With respect to friendships and connections, another way to look at this too is like, where do you put your trust and who trusts you, right? And how do you go about that process? This is the Queen of Cups. This is all feeling. People they like how they feel in your presence. Your friends as well. And they feel like you like them. This has to do with the fact that you have this ability to change and to be what you think they need on the outside. She is the person you want to hug, right? You just see her and you're like, I want to give her a hug. I hope she hugs me, and I hope she squeezes me for a couple seconds longer than last time, right? Like, it feels good. Like, when people see you, they get that feeling. There's a want to engage, right? And to have a little piece of this energy that that you have. You're so lucky to have that, because in this case, it's this is karmic again. This is, you were just given that, you know? And if you're not utilizing it, man, what a waste. Like, really. Okay. So, and finally, this is huge, because this is the card that's going to talk about what's inside of you for real that you don't know about. This is, but intrinsically, by nature of the card, is an unknown. Up until this moment, I'm about to turn this card, you have no idea what I'm about to say. This is like, this is going to hit you and go, wow, I should have known this, but why haven't I thought of it? Or I've been ignoring this, or wow, I never thought of that, but now that he says it. Okay, and what this card is that what's going on internally, subconsciously, as your motivation that you're not aware of, but it informs your conscious thought. It informs the lie we tell ourselves about what we're seeing so we can experience reality. It informs our emotions and the way that we react to that story. Like, all of that is, unless we take control, and it's this sort of like, it's the boss. And if we take control, it's no longer the boss, and we can have agency over our thoughts and feelings. But if we don't, this card is going to answer, what is your motivation coming from? What is the source subconsciously of your decisions? Okay, and let's just jump to the desk, and that card is change. Constant change, as a state of recognizing the fact that change cannot occur with baggage. You can't have new if you're hanging on to the old. The old's got to go, and until it does, nothing's going to change. And you are driven toward this change. Karmically. Subconsciously, you understand carrying things is expensive, emotionally, karmically. Don't carry too much, because what's the point, right? You're not taking it with you, so to speak. If you don't mind, I'm going to light an incense. Okay. So, death in this position is the lesson that subconsciously, actually let's go here instead. Subconsciously, you lack sometimes, most of the time, trust. Meaning that you know that what you're looking at is temporary, or you feel that way, right? You see the world, and subconsciously, your thoughts, feelings, ideas, or emotions view are that this is transient and can change, and with the correct knowledge, I can direct that change and benefit from it. And hopefully allow others to benefit at the same time so that we can all kind of accelerate that, right? But can't happen, just sitting around the old way. Which, makes a lot of sense to me just to begin with, just as sort of as like an obvious lesson, I suppose. Stagnation is typically a bad idea if growth is the goal, right? Change allows for the opportunity for growth. So, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to pause, and I'm going to say, Splash, if there's any particular questions you have, or Angelica, rather, if there's any questions that you have yet. Otherwise, I'm going to grab the other cards, and then we're going to expand on this, all right? So we get to the point of, all right, this is what we know. What do we do with that? Okay, let's just put these here so that we can have a clearer view. And if you want to, once it's all up, you can take a clean screenshot of the initial 12 houses before I start laying other cards on top of there that are not related. So there you go. All right, now I'm going to use the Oracle of the Radiant Sun as my method for making the connections between these. It uses the astrology system of the planet and sign, and it's very, at its core, the astrology built into tarot is connects it with this type of system very well. I'm glad that it's accurate. As far as the particular spot you want to look at, like, I feel like based on your question that, and let me jump to here so that there's context here for you. The position number 2, money, work, possession, is going to be relevant to your circumstance pretty heavily, right? A position number 9, I believe, is very relevant. That's going to determine your actions. Number 10 is relevant. And number 12, we may want to pop in on just to get maybe potentially some further insight. But we'll see. Okay, so first of all, what I want to do, I'm just going to shuffle these in the meantime. I'm just going to basically just shuffling back to forward in a random kind of process. And then I typically draw from the middle, like I find a random spot and draw from the middle, right? So as opposed to going like top down and like, all right, so that's my process with these cards. That said, the first place that I think I want to look into here is the star, the 2 position. All right. Let's see if these lined up properly. Yeah, no, that's not zoomed in properly. Yeah, I won't burden you by attempting to do that now. I'll fix that later. I suppose I could theoretically just copy this camera, paste it here. Okay, give me a moment. feel like it's worth it. Okay. There we go. Alright, so this way we can just pop this up and down. Okay, and then we can reference these cards a little easier. So, what we're looking at here is what is the connection between the second position and the second position being here on the bottom where the star is right now, and the action that should be taken in order to fulfill that. And that's the first thing that we're going to do. And then secondly, I'm going to look at, I don't know, 5 might seem interesting too, but I think more importantly, to get really to the heart of what we're talking about here, 7, 9, 10. All right. Three is kind of a biggie, but 7, 9, 10. Okay, so window. Okay. Okay, this card is Mars. Now, it has a planet in the sign, right? So, right now we're just talking about the planet. And there's a couple of different dynamics with respect to the Mars energy in this circumstance. It's definitely an active energy, right? This means something's being done. There's action being taken. This is not a passive energy. It's an active energy. The idea of criticism comes from the idea that this is, well, specifically this is Mars in Virgo. This is the sign Virgo. But it's the idea of being critical. That's the root for the term, criticism. Being critical, but making sure that it's known, right? The implication is that opinion is communicated willfully and to as many people as possible, right? You can do it individually, but I don't feel that here. I feel like the idea here is, and especially because it's falling on the star, the idea here is of when you shine light on things. Remember we talked about the difference between reflection and shining. When you shine light on things, you reveal the truth about those things, and that truth that you reveal may be hard for somebody to hear. Now, there's being an asshole, and there's constructive criticism, right? There's the difference between trying to gain through reducing somebody else and trying to actually grow them by helping them overcome their limitations and helping them identify those limitations. Those are two very different ideas, right? However, this is important because the question here is what action should be taken to ensure that you have proper utilization of this energy so that it's correct. And in being correct means that it will flow properly and you won't be fighting against your will. And so if you look at the idea of the star, part of the star represents your the product of suffering and nourishing at the same time. It's like the blood and the milk, right? Like you give blood and milk. Yep, that's right. Some people do that. And now the question is, why do you do that? Like, why do you choose to do both? And more importantly, what is the side effect of that? And the if that's done properly, the result of that is the star, which is great. Now you shine light and you are seen and you have your full potential realized. criticism is an aspect of that, meaning that it's part of the action that you take is to self-reflect actively with the intent of going, wait a minute, how much am I giving? How much am I getting? What is my role in all this? And how do I find that middle that is the appropriate energy, right? Like the right way to go about that. But this is not accidental in its current position, that this is pointing at the self kind of thing, and it just, everything about it is like you, the one, it's just everything about it says self. Reflection. Now I want to connect this though with nine. This is the sun in Cancer. The term that they use is resourcefulness. Not bad. It's more the idea, like we talked about, of change, that you have this ability to kind of access what you need from yourself when you need it. Oh, that's kind of neat. I have a bird like that on my desktop. It's a piece of art that I put together. But the sun in Cancer, resourcefulness. More importantly, yeah, it's sort of accessing what you need when you need it. Like if you imagine the yin yang as the black, revolving into the white, and the white having a piece of black, and the black having a piece of white, and these two things going to get this beautiful dance of positive, negative, male, female, all this. What this refers to, though, is the ability for you to kind of like stop it where you need and grab what you need, and then and some is a little bit more this direction than that, more this than that, and somewhere in between that, right? And you kind of find that level of energy that's necessary for the moment and utilize it. It's a tool to you. That level of resourcefulness also is outward, meaning that it's in your level of how you connect, how you interact with your environment. We talked about before language and how we see the world through language, right? What this refers to is the idea that your worldview is not permanent. You have a dynamic worldview. That's very fortunate because that gives you access to all kinds of goodies that most people can work years for and then never achieve or barely achieve. And you may find some of these things easy. Resourcefulness is a great term for what gives you the ability to access that. And criticism is also an important thing with respect to like what's going to get you to the star energy, because basically it's like saying, okay, where am I? Where am I going? What is it I'm looking to do? And how do I get there? Requires more than just asking those questions and looking for answers. It actually requires that inner work of saying, what do I need to get rid of? What's hanging around my life that I need to drop because it's not working out for me, right? And that's similar here to this transient state that's in a very dynamic place. It seems like here's sort of like an initial snapshot of this whole 12 cards is that you clearly are kind of carrying some stuff that it wouldn't hurt if you just let go of. Now, let's look at number 10. And this is the idea of social status, how you're viewed, which is kind of a big deal because a lot of our physical existence is based on the people around us and how we act and interact with them. This is Mercury and Scorpio. The term they use is extremism. Mercury being the card of the intellect, science, mathematics, that type thing, right? Data, this type thing. And then you have Scorpio, which refers to, basically you've got the idea here of, pardon me, a sharp, uncaring, cold, emotional action. Like, not being the goal. This is purely mental, purely scientific, right? So it's numbers, not my fault, right? The IRS calls you up that you got an audit. Why? Because your number got called, right? You got drafted into the war because your number got called, right? However, in this case, it's what extremism means is taking this to a negative place, like too extreme, or latching on to a certain idea that does not value or doesn't warrant it, and building a worldview around it, right? That's dangerous. And one of the reasons that that's dangerous too is because it stops you from moving forward. Once you stop on an idea, and that's the idea, and you don't go any further, you find yourself in a position of unrest and behavior changes. And it's not always good. Sometimes it's actually very detrimental to yourself, the people around you, the people you love, the people you're trying to manipulate to get what you want, the people that manipulate you to get what they want. All those relationships change. And extremism has an idea too, and this is important. It has agency over your identity. You identify with the thing that you become extreme about rather than yourself, instead of being yourself that's holding this idea. And that's bad. And never works out for the wrong end of that. And so that could hold you back if you allow this, which is a very, very positive energy. This is the Two of Swords in the 10 position, which is basically your outer self, what you show the world, your social status, how you're seen. And that's a very good energy, but if it gets to a bad level, you can wind up being cocky. You can wind up seeming unauthentic, or possibly even like shady, like, you know, like, and you don't want that, especially considering what it is that you're trying to do. You know, you need, you know, your meal ticket, your sell, your product is you, and their perceived authority over what you have to say, right? And that's important, right? And so that it can be very damaged if you decide to grab onto some nonsense and go with it. You're really smart. And that's driven by some serious energies in fire, which mean that you're passionate about those things that you know. And so you can't allow yourself to become a victim of someone else's thinking. That will hold you back. You know what you need to do. I don't care if they're an expert and they're your family and they won't shut up. This is your thing. Own it and don't listen to it. Do what you know you need to do, what you know needs to be done, what you know in your heart is going to be authentic to you. And guess what happens when you do that? This is what happens. This is the side effect of being you, which is that you shine a light so bright that you can't help but be drawn to that and to elicit attention, right? Okay. All right, so let me do this. Let me get a screenshot of the reading before We expanded. Okay, can you see everything on here? Let's see. Alright, so I hope that was insightful. Let me know if there's anything. Okay, you did. Here. Can you elaborate more? Okay, let's take a look at that. What are we on here? Number 10. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at that particular circumstance then. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep this out, keep that out. Okay, I'm going to keep this in between these two things. This is where you are. What do they see? What do they feel about you? When you put yourself out there, how is that received? That's twofold. There's what you're putting out and how they take that. But those are two things, and they're separate, and they require each other. This is the goal, right? The goal here is get rid of your junk, and because of that, radiate so much light that you can't help but attract people who are cold because of your warmth, who are sad because of your joy, and it's gonna those congregate, right? Now, what is the source of this extremism? Because what we're looking at here... Oh, that's funny. I just shuffled and pulled criticism. Yeah, all right. So, all right. Here's the deal. There's something going on with you subconsciously. There's a fear, and it's actually popped up in a couple of places. Physically, it popped up related to your worldview. It popped up related to your social status. You fear this extremism, and more important than that, you fear, I don't know if it's loss, or maybe if you show too much of your real self, people won't want it or like it. Here's one example of that too, and this is a metaphor, okay? Somebody who suffers from certain forms of mental illness, specifically what used to be called bipolar disorder. I forget what it's called now. I know they change the language all the time, but back in my day, I know I'm only 47, but whatever. We called it bipolar disorder. And now, when you're in your manic state of this, I guess they called it manic depression before that, you feel very powerful. And these are the people that you'll see like dancing their butts off at a club for 12 hours and, like live a very powerful, active lifestyle. But then they hit the low part of that. And I've seen this so many times with people in this state. And they just lose everything, right? And so they want treatment, and so they seek treatment. But then the doctor says to them, hey, take this pill, and it'll bring you even, right? And now they're worried to get treatment because they're going to lose that edge. They're going to lose that power that they access during the manic state, and they're afraid that that if they lose that, people won't like them anymore. Another example is the giver. The giver, that's expensive stuff, man. There has to be a balance between what you give and what you take, or you become empty. You become useless to you and them. You can't give anymore, and you got nothing out of it, and so you're just useless to both sides, and that's no good. I gotta fly here. Wow. So at the end of the day, that has to be addressed. And what is this extremism, right? Like, the real idea here is that recognize, here's the answer to the question. This is your second question, how to prevent it. Here's how you prevent it. Know who you are. And in that moment of the knowing, you shed a lot of this junk, right? Like, here's an example of that. Say you're about to get into a fight with somebody, like go into a battle, whether it's like you're going to do a chess contest, or you're going to like play poker. It doesn't matter what the battle is, but there's going to be this battle between you and another person. And you're scared. You access courage as the tool that allows you to act in spite of fear, right? But there's another side of that, which is to be fearless. And courage is not even necessary. Courage does not enter the circumstance because there is no fear for it to manifest in order to control. This is the same idea. The idea here is by recognizing 90% of what we do is driven toward that goal and not toward knowing ourselves, is wasted time and energy, and it gives us this false sense of ourself and who we are, and it changes our behavior. And so we have to let go of that inner chatter. It's okay, but don't identify with it, right? Or the people around you as well. Like, if people are gonna be naysayers, that's their problem, not yours. So you're gonna be okay. You will fail if you're not authentic. You will succeed if you are. And in fact, the level of success is good because there's an exponentialism to it. Right? And so it's like in the beginning, yeah, you'll have this level of growth, whatever, great. But then there's just like, it only takes one or two steps before it's kind of really a big thing, right? So at the end of the day, the action that needs to be taken, the lesson here is don't identify with the chatter. You know what you're doing, and it's okay, and it's gonna work. It's just a matter of being very careful to maintain your agency over your thought. It's very important that you don't get sucked into somebody else's thinking. When you know the right thing to do, you know it's gonna work. So keep ownership. Okay? And if you want, I can send you the screenshot to an email, or let me know what the best method of getting that over to you is, and I'll be happy to do that. Okay, and all I ask of anybody who got any insight or benefit or from what I'm doing, you consider liking the video. It means a lot. and consider leaving a comment. I try to stream at least once a day whenever possible. This week's a little weird. I'm doing some volunteering for the week before school starts down here for the kids. And it's local. It's a local thing, and so I've been very busy. But I will be streaming daily, starting probably Saturday, Sunday, guaranteed. Otherwise for this week it'll be kind of on and off. But that said, I hope that was insightful, and you can certainly please leave me a message if you require any additional clarification, or if there's any other questions that you want to expand on over there as well, and I'll be happy to cover that. We can even do it on a live stream sometime. I like doing that very much. So otherwise, if anyone would like to, I'm available for private readings as well, in a couple of different places. Obviously you can call and text that number, leave a voicemail, and I'll get back to you, or you can email or direct message, and we can discuss your particular circumstance, and what can be done from there. And check the channel for the daily message, the pet readings, the love readings, that type of thing, every day. Okay, and that does happen every day like clockwork. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it, and thank you, Angelica, for liking the video. It means a lot. And so I'll see you guys tomorrow. And if anyone would like, in the comment of this video, just put your month. I don't need the year, just the month and the day of your birth, and I'll be happy to provide you. I'll do it in the comments. I'll be happy to provide you with a free personal message, and that refers to, it's individual for everybody. It's not a bulk thing. It's different for everyone. I do it personally with the cards, and then I'll type the message in the comments. Like a 10-day horoscope of what to expect, and it's a very powerful tool. Okay, so anyone that would like to participate in that, just comment to this particular video with your day and month of birth, and I will provide you with your free message. Okay, so thank you so much, and we'll see you next time, and have a great night. Bye now.